Show. Scott, welcome back. Let me start with what I heard you say last night on Ask the Inspector, and it's quite eerie, really. You predicted that we will be in nuclear war in 2026. The Chief of the British General Staff gives us 6 months more left to live. He says it'll be the middle of 2027. Have we really quietly sleepwalked into this situation?
Unfortunately, I think we have. First of all, when the British Chief of General Staff speaks, he's talking about conventional confrontation, and that's part of the calculation. Somehow, the United States and NATO have gotten into their thick skulls that embracing a policy that seeks the strategic defeat of Russia in Ukraine is a harmless policy, that there's no consequences for their actions, without reflecting on the fact that Russia's nuclear posture, which dictates the conditions under which Russia can use nuclear weapons, stipulates that if there is a conventional threat to the existential survival of Russia, that Russia will use nuclear weapons to eliminate this threat. We in the West say, we can't have victory in Ukraine until we return Russia to its 1991 borders. There's a modification of that says, we'll accept the 2022 borders. The 1991 borders means that Russia gives up Crimea, gives up Kherson, Zaporizhia, Lugansk, and Donetsk. These are all territories of the Russian Federation today. To lose one or more of these territories is, by definition, an existential threat to the security of Russia. To lose Crimea by itself is an existential threat. So all the people that post this and postulate this and say this is what we want, you are literally by definition creating the conditions for the release of Russian nuclear weapons just by your own actions. Now, and so this is part of the lowering of the threshold for the release of nuclear weapons that's taking place both in the West and another one. Jan Stoltenberg says, we're going to take 24 of these 100 B-61 bombs we have sprinkled around Europe, and we're going to put them on operational standby. That means they're not sitting in a nuclear weapons locker under key, and decisions have to be made to pull it out, to activate them, et cetera. No, they're going to be ready to rock and roll, ready to be put underneath an F-35A or an F-16 that belongs to one of any number of nations. It used to be just 5, but now the NATO nuclear deterrence people are saying anybody that has an F-35, including Poland, by the way, when they get them, or an F-16, can now opt into being a nation capable of delivering nuclear weapons. This means that every time one of these aircraft take off from a NATO airfield, Russia has to assume they carry a nuclear weapon. And of course, if it's the F-35, it carries it in weapons bays underneath, so you can't physically tell. Let's say that 3 of these take off and now come screaming towards the Belarus border or the border with Ukraine or in the Baltics in some sort of, manly demonstration of force to Russia. Russia has to assume that they're carrying nuclear weapons. And the closer they get, the closer to the threshold of Russia's own hair-trigger nuclear response we get. And we haven't even talked about the fact that in 2026, the United States and Germany have reached an agreement for the reintroduction of intermediate-range missiles back onto European soil. That weapons that I got rid of. This is why it's a little personal to me, George. I know I'm getting a little hot under the collar and a little angry here, but I was part of the process, the people, the team that got rid of what was then the greatest threat, not only to European security, but global security. Because here's the other thing I'm going to tell your European audience. There's no such thing as limited nuclear warfare, none whatsoever, especially when it comes to the potential of NATO American weapons being used against Russia. A nuclear weapon used against Russia on Russian soil is the equivalent of Russia firing nuclear weapons at the United States. Russia will respond with the totality of its nuclear arsenal, destroying everything in Europe and everything in the United States it can't possibly reach. And now we're talking about putting back these weapons that have the potential of carrying nuclear weapon or warheads. The ground-launched cruise missile has a nuclear warhead that's in storage right now. Right now, we don't keep it on the weapon because of the caps provided by the Strategic Nuclear Force, the New START Treaty. That expires February 4th, 2026. After that point, the cap is gone. We will bring all these warheads out. The ground-launched cruise missiles will have nuclear warheads. And now Russia's looking at a situation where when you talk about protocols, you know that briefcase that people carry around, they think it's the red button that the president pushes or the Russian president. There's no red button in it. That's not what happens. There's a series of protocols And when it's opened up, the president will be presented with laminated pieces of paper with a protocol on who he talks to, how what coordination has to be done to get the weapons ready to launch and to be launched. There's also these little aluminum cookies you launch, you read the codes, but we don't need to get into that. The protocol is the important thing here because the protocols are built on a presumption that the president will have between 15 and 30 minutes. The Russian protocols are similar, 15 to 30 minutes to make a decision. When you introduce intermediate nuclear weapons into Europe, especially hypersonic Dark Eagle weapons, the Russians now have 6 minutes. There ain't no protocol for 6-minute coordination. The only option Russia has at that point in time is to hit the button and launch everything, or preempt, which is another thing Russia's looking at. We have created the conditions where Russian nuclear doctrine is going to be triggered. We have lowered the threshold for the use of these weapons, and we're doing everything humanly possible to front load scenarios that put Russia on the defensive, where Russia either has to preempt with their own nuclear weapons what they deem to be an imminent nuclear weapon attack by the United States, or have a hair trigger response if they detect something coming their way, and they will fire everything in response. When I look at this, and I knowing human beings as I have, and knowing the history, I mean, people understand we've come very close in the past to having accidents that lead to a nuclear exchange. I'm not confident that we're competent enough to ride through this period of time. In fact, I believe just the opposite. I believe that people don't believe that Russia has a nuclear doctrine that is real. They view it as a bluff. They view it as a fake, and they're willing to push the boundaries in hopes that Russia folds like a house of cards. Now, Russia won't fold, and if we continue in this direction without interruption, I personally believe that the summer of 2026 may be the last summer any of us enjoy on this planet. And I'm not saying that I hope it scares people, but I'm not throwing that irresponsibly. As you said, I've been doing this for a while. This is something that I know an awful lot about. I know the mindset, I know the policies, I know the procedures. And when I put it all together, we don't have the checks and balances in place to prevent a nuclear war. If we allow things to go forward unchecked as they are now, the summer of 2026 is going to be a very, very dangerous period of time.
In the past, some of what you're saying, much of it actually, was a widely shared set of anxieties, fears, and motivations. I was one of those. You may have been on the other side. I was one of those, highly active in the movement against the sighting of the cruise and Pershing missiles in Britain, in Europe, in the 1980s. Millions of us in total marched against these deployments, and fear of nuclear war was palpable and everywhere, and often in the media, often amongst the political class, the subject of discussion and debate. Why I used the word sleepwalking earlier is that we're having this conversation, and we have between us a small number of millions of viewers, but the billions outside are neither being told by the mass media or by the political class that any of this is of any importance to them or anything they should worry their pretty little heads about. And that's the really worrying thing, isn't it?
100%. It frightens me because normally you'd like to believe that rational thinking humans, people with a modicum of sanity would step in and do the right thing, as you did. I applaud you. I mean, look, in the 1980s, while you were doing that, I was a Marine who was wrapped up in the flag and, drinking Ronald Reagan's Kool-Aid. And, I'm always somebody who respects people's rights. And indeed, I took an oath to defend the Constitution that gives people the right to demonstrate. And even though I don't agree with what you were doing was brilliant act of citizenship, a required act of citizenship, because what you did, and this is the point I want to make, what you did put in place the political impetus that led to the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty. What you did and others did, millions of others did back then, is put a marker on the table that had political viability, that resonated politically, that said, we will not tolerate this. And so the forces that be had to take that into consideration, and in the pause that exists between your act of absolute brilliant citizenship and the signing of the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty in December of 1987 by Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev, the people who make these decisions reflected on the danger that these weapons produced, and they agreed, we need to get rid of them. And we did get rid of them. One of the finest moments of my life was the 2 years I spent actively participating in the implementation of that treaty in its earliest stages. So we need that today. But where are the people? Where are the people? People believe today. I mean, right now in America, we have an election coming up. If nuclear weapons, if preventing nuclear war is not on the agenda, if we're not compelling the candidates to talk about what their plan is for peace, for preventing nuclear war, for promoting arms control, then whoever is in the office won't be able to do anything between 2026. We have to start the moment that person gets sworn in. And so I'm glad you brought up the fact, we do have between the two of us millions of followers, of viewers. Not all of them agree with us. I know in my case, a lot of them just follow to snipe at me and attack me. That's okay. I'm glad I provide entertainment. But there are many others who do. We're going to be doing something here in the United States on September 28th to use alternative media, to use the podcasts like ours who reach out to millions of Americans to see if we can get enough Americans to commit their vote, not to a person or a party, but to an issue, preventing nuclear war. And if we get enough committed votes in the swing states, let's say, because Michigan is going to go 10,000 votes one way or the other. If I can get 50,000 commitments, we're now politically viable in Michigan. And now we have between September 28th and November to force these people, if you want to win Michigan, put this on the table. That's our equivalent of what you did. What we need also is Germany to wake up. We need the German farmers to realize that the beautiful German dirt that they grow the harvest that feeds Germany and Europe is about to be contaminated forever with nuclear radiation, that Germany will become a nuclear battleground. And that's it. Germany can't host these weapons. We need the German people to rise up in the streets, as you did back in the day, back in the 80s, and say, no, we will not accept these weapons. We need the German people and the American people to come together to prevent the deployment of the intermediate nuclear forces back into Europe. And we need the British people, we need all of Europe to rise up and say, stop the insanity. Why statements can be made by senior British military officers that lead only to the inevitability of conflict. Russia is not seeking a broader war with Europe. That is absolutely certain. But if Europe postures as if Russia is, and acts on that, Europe creates a threat that Russia has no choice but to respond to. That means, again, we lower the threshold for the use of nuclear weapons, we heighten the tension, and the outcome is inevitable. So we need to reawaken that spirit of citizenship, not just national citizenship, but global citizenship, global responsibility for the world we live in. What you acted on back in the 1980s, we need to reawaken that, and we need all the help we can get.
Scott, there's so much else to discuss. If I may pivot and leave it, and I'd so much like to ask you, but we don't have time, how Joe Biden could be the man with these protocols, how we could be confident that a man in his mental state could be entrusted with those protocols. But he's gone. There was a coup in Washington. If it was happening in the Kremlin, as has happened before with Khrushchev, I heard you discuss it last night on your show, which was brilliant, by the way, it would be described as a coup in the Kremlin. But it was a coup in the White House, wasn't it?
100%. I did an interview with a Russian, and normally when I talk to Russian journalists or Russian leaders, officials, I want to learn about Russia and bring it back to a Western audience as part of my ongoing effort to eliminate Russophobia by empowering people with knowledge. But given what's happening in America, I wanted to get the Russian perspective. And he said something fascinating to me that it's in my mind. It's bothered me tremendously because I'm an American that maybe has rose-colored glasses. I'm critical of my country, but I like to believe that my country is inherently healthy, that America's okay, that if we just get on the right track, we're going to do all right. And he said, when we look at America today, what we see is the Soviet Union in the final stages of perestroika, when the collapse was happening, the end of the Soviet Union, a dysfunctional society, a society in disarray. And I went, really? You see that in America? And he went, sure, why not? You just had a coup. Duh. I mean, think about it. We had a coup. The Democratic Party has inserted somebody, selected somebody who could very well be the president of the United States, who has foregone any of the normal participatory election, prerequisites. Kamala Harris didn't survive a primary back in 2020. She dropped out early on because nobody supported her. She was selected to be vice president. She wrote on a ticket that wasn't so much about Biden-Harris, but about anti-Trump. For the last 3+ years, she's done nothing. She's a horrible vice president, no reputation, no good reputation. She couldn't have survived the primary. If Biden had done what he was supposed to do, one-term president turning the baton over to the next generation named Kamala Harris, if she had gone through a primary challenge, she wouldn't have made it. She wouldn't have passed the initial Democratic benchmark, to qualify. She'd be done. So they avoided that. Biden came in, won the primary, came in, and now they've pushed him aside, inserted her. It's a coup, a literal coup. Coups don't have to be violent. This is a soft coup happening in America today. We are a society in disarray. We are a society in decline. And the reason why I can say that wholeheartedly is no one's talking about it. Everybody's acting as if this is the mainstream media is in normal. They're in a love fest right now. Oh, she's the greatest thing. Don't they understand that we're supposed to be a constitutional republic where we select the people who represent us, who manage the republic through the democratic processes of representational elections. That the will of the people is manifest here. And they've eliminated the will of the people, and the mainstream media is celebrating it, and the people are silent. We are a nation in collapse. And if we don't figure out how to reverse this, the United States will probably go the way of the Soviet Union.
Professor Niall Ferguson, an unlikely source to be quoted by me, he's written quite a powerful piece on that very subject, Scott. If you haven't read it, I commend it to you. Now, you say there was no violence. We don't know what they did to Joe to get him to sign that paper, if he signed it. We'll maybe check for bruises if he does appear later this evening. But there was extreme violence in Pennsylvania a week before. And as we're talking about a coup, that too looks and smells like a coup to me. If it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's possibly a duck. When I study, as I've been able to these last few days, the chronology and the rest of what happened or almost happened to Donald Trump, he was a whisker away, the wisp of a blonde wig hair away from that bullet exploding the back of his head. And imagine the situation we would have been in now if that whisker had gone the other way. The head of the Secret Service has now resigned, possibly to avoid being questioned still further. The most powerful country in the world has got a coup going on in the White House and a coup going on against the main challenger for the presidency in just 100 days from now. I mean, how worried should we be?
I'm scared to death because the chronology that you have studied doesn't point to an accident. It doesn't point to honest mistakes. It points to something far more nefarious, collusion amongst agencies directed by higher authority that had created a condition inside America, a political condition that viewed the target as an existential threat to American democracy worthy of being eliminated. Not just worthy of, but by definition, if you're an existential threat, it must be eliminated. Donald Trump must be eliminated, cannot be allowed to be president, because if he becomes president, it's the end of America. That's what President Biden was saying. That's what senior members of the Senate and the Congress, that's what the mainstream media was saying. Jake Tapper, who moderated the June 27th debate, called Donald Trump the equivalent of Adolf Hitler. So we have a system where Trump has been set up as a target. Biden actually said, put a target on him. I know he says it was in a different context, but hey, if you're somebody listening out there who's been told this is the modern day equivalent of Adolf Hitler, and the president says, put a target on him, what does that mean? I think it means put a target on him. And then you have this patsy, this kid with no training, suddenly flying a drone, doing professional level reconnaissance of 3 encrypted phones, manages to get a rifle up on the roof, bear crawling up the only approach that shields him from the counter sniper teams, and gets off 8 shots, 3 of which should have killed the president, the former president of the United States. It's a miracle. I'm not religious, but I may be after this, because there is literally no other configuration of his head that could have existed without taking off his head. It was a successful kill shot. It was just the last minute inadvertent twitch that saved him. How did this happen? The emergency services unit, not from the Secret Service, but from local cops, got pulled from the one spot that could have stopped this. They were pulled from that leaving it unguarded while he crawled up, while everybody's screaming, "There's the shooter, there's the shooter." This just sounds too much like that scene from the Tom Hanks movie, The Road to Perdition, where the mafia assassin is given permission to take out a target, and he walks through the hotel, and all the bodyguards just stand aside as he walks up and kills the guy. This kid was given a clean route straight to the president and took the shots that should have killed the president. This team that's protecting him, that's amateur hour up there. The length of time it took them to get around the president, to get him off the stage, the fact that they didn't get him off the stage prior to this. The moment somebody spotted this kid up there, they should have taken the president off the stage. He should never have gotten on the stage. This doesn't happen by accident. Somebody at a very senior level wanted Donald Trump dead. That's my assessment. And you have to treat it this way, given the current political situation. So, and again, they keep showing these aren't the guys that took the shot. These guys didn't fire a single shot. In fact, when the shots were fired, they recoil. The other guy withdraws. They're not engaged. It was another sniper team that took the killing shot. Again, a lack of professionalism. I mean, that's just not how it's done, man. So yeah, I'm of a firm belief that Donald Trump was targeted by federal officials to be assassinated that day. And somebody has to prove this wrong. We're at the stage
even
right
as
now
you say that, Scott, even as you say that, it is remarkable how normalized that has become. I mean, with one bound, they were free from all of that by the simple bound of putting Kamala Harris on the stage and bopping and laughing. They wiped that subject from the mass media. And now they may not be wearing navy blue uniforms and grey uniforms, but this is civil war we are describing here. When the government tries to kill the putative president, and indeed a past president, the immediate past president, when the government tries to kill the main contender for the presidency and almost succeeds, and when the failing seems to precipitate the overthrow in a coup inside the White House of the sitting president, this is a kind of 21st century civil war, is it not?
It is. People talk about hybrid warfare. They accuse Russia. Russia's waging hybrid warfare, which means they're seeking to achieve strategic objectives without high intensity direct combat. This is a hybrid coup, hybrid civil war. Rather than having blue and gray lined up against each other, shooting at one another, this is the danger. I mean, people have poo-pooed the idea of the deep state. They poo-pooed the idea of the establishment. I have friends who promote, the professional class of unelected bureaucrats who dominate policymaking and policy implementation in Washington, D.C. But they are the greatest threat to American democracy today because they're the ones that made this happen. They're the ones who carried out the coup against Biden. They're the ones who facilitated the assassination attempt against Donald Trump. They are the kingmakers, the literal kingmakers. They are the power brokers. They are the secret power behind the power. And if we're not calling that out, if we still want to pretend, look, George, I'm new to this because I was somebody 6 months ago who still wrapped myself in the flag and believed in American democracy and believed in the power of the people. And if we just woke up and did our job, we could fix this thing. The establishment, this entrenched bureaucracy, is a threat. And I saw that firsthand 2 years ago when I went to a Intermediate Nuclear Forces reunion. And we had an arms control official come up and we asked the question, why didn't Joe Biden act on his promise to change nuclear posture to a sole use doctrine, meaning the sole purpose of nuclear weapons is to retaliate against a nuclear attack instead of this current preemptive policy? And the response was because the interagency wasn't ready. When you're the president of the United States, the chief executive, there's no such thing as the interagency not being ready. They either become ready or you fire them. The point being made there, and maybe that's not the point that this person wanted to make, is that the president's not in charge of American policy, that there's this unelected blob in Washington, D.C. that's calling the shots about everything from nuclear war on down. And they're the ones who removed Joe Biden from power, and they're the ones who tried to kill Donald Trump.
Wow. I wish I could talk to you all night, Scott. We must make arrangements for that perhaps quite soon. It would be good to take a whole hour talking with you. You are quite simply spellbinding in the grasp of detail and strategic sweep that you have. But thanks for your time this evening. Scott Ritter, former Arms Inspector for the United Nations, former Marine Corps Intelligence Officer.